He had a badge. He had a dream. But in the quiet of a pilot's lounge, a black teenager's dream was crushed by suspicion. What happened next? No one saw it coming, especially not the woman who thought she held all the power. Morning sunlight poured through the tall glass panels of Sierra Gateway International Airport, casting a warm golden hue across the marble floor. Malik Turner, 16 years old, sat quietly on a charcoal-gray leather chair inside the Skydeck Lounge, the private resting area reserved for Skirich aviation pilots. Pinned neatly to the front of his crisp white shirt was a sky-blue guest badge, bearing the airline's logo and the words, Career Exploration Program, NADA. It wasn't just a badge. It was a symbol of pride, a golden ticket he had earned after beating out hundreds of applicants across the state of Arizona. Malik was mesmerized by the TV mounted on the wall, a documentary on the history of commercial aviation. His eyes lit up watching the first Boeing aircraft take flight, his heart racing as if he were the one sitting in the cockpit. For this black teenager, simply being inside the pilot's lounge felt like a dream come true. But that dream was suddenly ripped apart. The lounge door swung open with a bang, startling Malik. A tall woman strode in, her pilot uniform immaculate, for gleaming gold stripes on each shoulder. It was Captain Laura McBride, 42, a veteran pilot with over 2 decades in the industry, known for her strict demeanor and military precision. Her icy blue eyes scanned the room, landing suspicious and sharp on Malik's face. "What are you doing in here?" she snapped, her voice dry and razor-sharp. Malik shot to his feet, hands trembling slightly as he tried to remain composed. "Ma'am, I'm Malik Turner. I'm part of the Skirich Career Exploration Program. I'm waiting for Ms. Sandra Patel from HR to come back." McBride marched toward him with the brisk, commanding pace of someone escorting a criminal. "What program? This isn't some student field trip or a job shadow game. This is a restricted area for cleared pilots only. You need to leave now." "But I have a badge," Malik stammered, lifting the ID on his chest like a fragile shield of legitimacy. McBride didn't even glance at it. She pulled out her radio and spoke sharply into the mic. "Security, respond immediately to the Skydeck Lounge. We have an unidentified black male breaching secure zone." Malik froze. His heartbeat felt like it had been crushed in a fist. No one in the spacious room spoke up, not a word of defense, not a glance of empathy, only suspicion, only coldness, an invisible force, built from fear, bias, and a uniform stitched with unchecked power, began pushing him out of the dream he had chased all his young life, all because of his skin color, and the judgment of one adult with a badge. The crackle of the radio still echoed through the air, stretching the heavy silence that had descended over the Skydeck Lounge. Malik stood frozen, wide-eyed, his palms ice-cold as he instinctively gripped the ID badge now deemed fake. Captain Laura McBride folded her arms, her gaze hard as forged steel, fixed on a teenage boy in front of her. "You think I don't know what's going on here?" she snapped. "A kid your age, black, sitting alone in a pilot's lounge? You think we're that easy to fool?" Her chin lifted and her tone shifted. Not a question anymore, but an accusation. "This badge, it's fake. A cheap little trick to get past security." She said it slowly, clearly, then yanked the lanyard from around Malik's neck. The strap snapped with a harsh click. Like the crack of a whip, Malik took a step back, his throat tightening. "Ms. Sandra Patel, she's a program coordinator. She gave me that badge this morning." Ms. Patel might be naive. McBride cut in sharply, "But I'm not. I've spent over 20 years in aviation. I can spot a threat the moment it walks through the door." Malik wanted to respond, to scream that he wasn't a threat, that he loved the sky, that he dreamed of sitting in a cockpit since he was 6 years old. But the words stuck, too heavy to lift past his lips. He glanced around. No one in the room came to his defense. The other pilots entering the lounge halted at the threshold, their eyes wary, cold, like he was some foreign object to be ejected. "You all hear that?" McBride turned to the new arrivals, her voice rising like a lecture. "This is exactly what happens when someone tries to breach a restricted area using false credentials. He could be gathering intel, corporate espionage. Who knows? A low murmur began to spread behind Malik. One young pilot furrowed his brow. Another shook his head. A few phones were raised, recording the moment. Beneath the sterile LED lights of the lounge, Malik no longer felt human. He felt like a headline. Unidentified black teen in pilot zone, just waiting to be filed in some internal security report. His heart pounded wildly. His legs wobbled. He was shaking, not with anger, but with something colder, crueler, despair. The kind of despair that feels like wind cutting into a climber's face on a frozen mountain peak. All he wanted was for someone, anyone, to walk in, confirm the truth, clear his name. But no one came, only footsteps. 2 airport security officers appeared at the doorway, gray uniforms, unreadable expressions. One held a radio. The other had already started toward Malik. He took another step back. His lip trembled. He bit down hard until he tasted blood. In the chaos inside and around him, one thought screamed through the noise. "Dad, I need you." Malik stood there, thin shoulders trembling beneath a roomful of judgmental stares. The 2 officers were fully inside now, eyes scanning him like he might be hiding a bomb instead of a dream. But just as reality began to squeeze the breath from his lungs, another door creaked open, this one not in the airport, but in Malik's mind. A door into memory, a door filled with light. He remembered his 6th birthday, when his father, Jerome Turner, newly appointed deputy director of the National Aviation Transportation Authority, NATA, brought him to Sierra Gateway Airport for a surprise. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't a cake. It was a real-life aircraft tour. Malik had been tiny then, his wide eyes shimmering with anticipation. He gripped his father's hand tightly, stumbling along in his oversized sneakers, trying to match the stride of the warm, towering man beside him. As they approached the Boeing 777 bathed in the morning sun, Malik looked up in awe and asked through the breeze, "Daddy, why is the plane as big as a building?" Jerome chuckled, leaned down, and whispered, "Because it was built to carry dreams into the sky." From that moment on, Malik wasn't a kid obsessed with cars or superheroes anymore. He loved airplanes, with the obsessive wonder of someone who adored jazz classics. Focused, passionate, almost reverent, his bedroom walls were covered in posters of aircraft: Airbus A350, Lockheed State Route 71, Concorde. Even a model of the Wright Flyer dangled from the ceiling on a fishing line. Every afternoon, Jerome would sit with him, patiently explaining how jet engines worked, how lift was generated, how planes landed safely in rough weather. Malik listened like each word was scripture. They had a ritual. Every Sunday was flight deck day, when father and son would boot up the flight simulator in the living room. Malik as captain, Jerome as co-pilot, fumbling through radio calls, mock emergencies, and bursts of laughter. Once, Malik even built an entire cardboard airport with Lego terminals, used a stick as a signal wand and a flashlight as runway lights. Jerome filmed the whole thing, laughing as he narrated. Captain Turner, head of an entire aviation empire. That passion never faded. It only burned hotter. As Malik got older, he began sketching cockpit layouts, studying aerodynamics, and joined online aviation forums where he chatted with real pilots. So when he heard about the Skirich Aviation Career Exploration Program, he stayed up 3 nights in a row to write his application essay. He wrote about that first airport visit, the simulator Sundays with his dad, and the silent promise he'd made to himself. One day, I will sit in a real cockpit. And now, that dream, years in the making, was being crushed. Not because Malik did something wrong, but because someone looked at him and decided he didn't belong. The memory of his 6th birthday hadn't even faded when the harsh reality came crashing back. The sterile lights, the suspicious eyes, the rhythm of security boots echoing across the marble floor. One of the officers, tall, with graying hair, stepped forward and barked, "Son, hand over your ID. Now, and explain why you're in the Skydeck lounge without a supervisor." Malik steadied himself, drawing on the flicker of courage ignited by the memory of his father's words. He slowly held out the badge that had been torn from his neck, his voice trembling but clear. "My name is Malik Turner. I'm from Lincoln Preparatory High School. I was selected for the Skirich Career Exploration Program. Ms. Sander Patel, the program coordinator, brought me in. She told me I could wait here while she took an urgent call. From behind, Captain Laura McBride folded her arms and let out a mocking scoff. "Well rehearsed," she sneered. "Sounds like a script from some after-school teen drama." Malik turned to face her, his eyes pleading. "You can call," Ms. Patel to confirm. "I swear I wasn't trying to deceive anyone. I was just waiting for my guide." "That's enough." McBride snapped, stepping forward, her voice sharp and rising. "Do you think people have time to chase down your story? Do you know how many times saboteurs have gotten in by spinning sweet little tales like this?" Outside the Skydeck Lounge, the crowd had grown larger. A few people whispered. A few scoffed. One young pilot muttered to his colleague, "Bet he's trying to film a TikTok. Look at him, shifty as hell." Malik heard it all, every word piercing his dignity like needles. At the coffee bar, a group of 3 flight attendants huddled together, whispering. One of them discreetly raised a phone, camera trembling slightly as it zoomed in on his face. Then, a new voice cut through the tension. From afar into the hallway, a woman's voice rang out, loud and urgent. "Stop. Stop right now." Every head turned. A young logistics staffer, Nia, a new colleague of Ms. Patel, was sprinting toward them, holding a tablet in her hands, her face flushed with panic. "I have the security footage," she gasped. It shows Ms. Patel bringing Malik into the pilot lounge, handing the badge, and telling him to wait. He had every right to be here. The air froze. But before anyone could respond, McBride stepped forward, seizing control again. She waved a hand dismissively, her voice cold and cutting. "We'll review the footage, if it's legitimate. But for now, I'm still requesting this individual be removed for investigation. We don't clear anyone without verified credentials. Today it's a student. Tomorrow it could be anyone posing as one." Malik stood his ground, fists tightening at his sides. Inside, something had ignited, not rage, but resolve. Because now he understood. Even with proof, even with the truth, bias could still drown out reason. He stood silently, surrounded by suspicion, humiliation, and cold indifference. He felt like a crumpled piece of paper in the storm of prejudice, something easily discarded. Even with Nia's footage, even with the evidence as plain as day, no one in power seemed willing to accept the truth without resistance. Captain Laura McBride loomed before him, her eyes still sharp with suspicion, now tinged with frustration at being challenged. "What are you waiting for?" She barked at the 2 security officers. "Escort him out. His presence is unauthorized. His documents are unverified. Keep allowing this, and by tomorrow, anyone could walk in here under a fake name." Malik stepped back, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the world. No one stepped in to stop it. Nia was being held aside by airport staff, her tablet confiscated for verification. Everything Malik had once been proud of, the ID badge, the coveted placement in the prestigious program, now meant nothing in the eyes of those who looked at him like garbage that had blown into a clean space. A chill crept up his spine. His hands trembled as he pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers slick with sweat as they slid across a familiar screen. Dad. The first contact in his favorites list, Jerome Turner Dad, tapped without hesitation. It rang once, twice. Each chime felt like knocking on the last door hope hadn't closed. Around him, the whispering grew louder. A male flight attendant sneered under his breath. "Oh, please, calling Daddy now?" Not everyone gets a call in family to clean up their mess. A middle-aged pilot shook his head, sighing with disapproval. If he were innocent, why is he shaking like that? Malik turned his face away, blinking back the tears rising to the surface. They didn't understand. They didn't want to. To them, he wasn't a student. He was a problem. A black kid in a place he didn't belong. Right or wrong didn't matter. And then the voice came through. "Malik? What's going on, son?" That voice, calm, deep, unmistakable, broke something open inside him. His voice cracked, barely holding together. "Dad, I'm at the Skydeck Lounge. They said my badge is fake. They don't believe me. They said I could be a spy. Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. There was silence on the other end, but it wasn't confusion. It wasn't rage. It was purpose, solid and immediate. Listen to me carefully, Malik. Stay exactly where you are. No one lays a hand on you. I'm coming. Now. And in that moment, Malik's knees stopped trembling, not because safety had arrived, but because hope had. He looked around. The stairs were still cold, but they no longer made him lower his eyes, because somewhere in this airport, someone was walking toward him, not carrying fear, but carrying justice. Less than 10 minutes later, the air inside Skydeck Lounge felt strung tight, like a piano wire about to snap. Those who had mocked him now stood silent, tension rippling across their faces. A few pilots still murmured quietly among themselves, but their eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Then came the crackle of the security radio. A dispatcher's voice rang out, firm and official. All units in Sector C, be advised, a VIP from a National Aviation Transportation Authority is en route to Skydeck Lounge. Stand by and coordinate as needed. Malik lifted his head. The voice hadn't said a name, but he didn't need it to. He knew his father was coming. It felt like the air around him shifted, as if something invisible had pulled back, like a wall retreating to make way for something bigger than any one person. Justice. And then the door opened. Jerome Turner, Deputy Director of the National Aviation Transportation Authority, strode into the Skydeck Lounge. He wore a dark gray suit, tailored to perfection, the NADA insignia gleaming on his lapel. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone silenced the entire room. Flanking him were two senior officials, one holding a tablet, the other wearing a badge labeled Southwest Regional Security Supervisor. Jerome walked directly to Malik, placing a firm, reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. Malik's throat tightened. Tears threatened to rise, but one look from his father anchored him again. "I'm here now," Jerome said low and steady. Then he turned to McBride. His voice was deep, deliberate, and heavy with command. "Captain Lauren McBride, I've received the report and listened to the audio from my son. Now I'd like to hear from you. On what grounds did you accuse a student with verified credentials of being a spy?" McBride took a half step back, but tried to maintain composure. "Mr. Turner, I didn't know he was your son. I was simply following procedure. An unaccompanied minor in a restricted area. That's a violation." Jerome's brow furrowed. His stare was sharp enough to slice steel. "It doesn't matter whether you knew he was my son. What matters is that you didn't check. You ignored evidence, refused to listen, and publicly humiliated a student, treating him like a criminal in front of airline staff and passengers." The atmosphere solidified. The murmurs were gone. Those who had gossiped and laughed now stared at the floor. Malik looked at McBride, the woman who had loomed like a fortress, now cracked and brittle beneath public scrutiny. Jerome's voice landed like a hammer on stone. "And what's more disturbing than your actions is your attitude. A veteran captain who dismisses investigative protocol, who lets personal bias dictate professional conduct." McBride opened her mouth, but Jerome raised a hand, sharp and final. "I'm not done. This is no longer a personal matter. This is a serious breach of professional ethics, and I will personally oversee the investigation." Not a sound followed. Malik stood taller now, beside the man who taught him to love the sky, his fear replaced by something steadier. A flicker of belief rekindled. No one had to say it out loud, but everyone in that room felt it. The balance of power had just shifted. The air in the Skydeck Lounge grew dense, as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. The stares no longer pointed at Malik. They were all on Captain Lauren McBride, once wrapped in the authority of 4 golden bars, now standing exposed, in the center of a silent courtroom of her own making. Jerome Turner didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was enough to turn the entire lounge into a hearing chamber. He gave a small nod to the official beside him, the man with the Southwest Regional Security badge, who tapped his tablet and connected to the large screen mounted above the waiting area. "This is surveillance footage from the Skydeck corridor at 8:46 a.m. this morning. The regional security supervisor announced clearly. The video began to play. Every eye in the room turned to the screen. There, in crisp, undeniable clarity, was Sandra Patel, the program coordinator, smiling as she led Malik Turner into the pilot's lounge. She said something to him, handed him the lanyard herself, pointed toward the seats, and then exited the area, leaving Malik quietly watching TV. He didn't touch anything, didn't move around, didn't act out of place, just sat politely waiting. Next moment, 9:03, the supervisor continued. Captain McBride enters. Silence. No one dared interrupt. The video rolled forward. McBride appeared, storming in, not checking credentials, not making a single call to confirm anything. She went straight to Malik, her posture confrontational, her tone, though silent in the footage, clearly hostile. The difference between the images and the story she told earlier was glaring. A chasm of truth had just opened. And then, bang, a coffee cup slammed onto a table. Kyle Mendoza, a young pilot who had earlier muttered a mocking comment, stood up abruptly, voice sharp with anger. What the hell are we doing? That kid didn't do anything wrong, and we all just sat here and watched him get humiliated. His words cracked through the frozen tension like a hammer on glass. Heads turned. A few nodded. A female flight attendant stepped toward Malik, shame clouding her expression. The ripple grew. Someone near the back murmured, "I thought something fell off." Another whispered, "I wish I'd said something sooner." Jerome Turner didn't speak. He stood firm, letting the wave of truth wash over people who had once chosen silence. After a moment, he slowly turned to McBride. "Do you have anything to say, Captain?" McBride's lips tightened. Her face had gone pale. The fire in her eyes, gone. Her voice was barely audible. I only wanted to ensure safety." Jerome's reply was calm but absolute. Safety is not an excuse for abusing authority. And discrimination is never safety. The supervisor stepped forward. "We've reviewed her internal record. This is not the first time Captain McBride has been reported for racial profiling." A new wave of murmurs spread. No one could pretend this was an isolated incident anymore. This wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror held up to a system long used to looking away. Malik stood beside his father, still silent, but not alone. The nods, the apologetic glances, the firestorm of truth ignited by Kyle's sudden outburst, all pointed to one reality. The truth had woken up. A heavy silence blanketed the room the moment the security supervisor mentioned Captain Laura McBride's prior complaints. What had begun as whispers had thickened into a quiet, simmering anger. The Skydeck Lounge, once a resting spot between flights, was no longer for sipping coffee or making small talk. It had become the scene of a reckoning. Jerome Turner took one deliberate step toward McBride. His voice rang out, clear, unshaken, metallic in its finality. "I am formally requesting that representatives of NADA and Skirich Aviation suspend Captain McBride from duty effective immediately, pending a full investigation. What occurred this morning is not something we can look past, not just as a parent, but as a leader in this industry." Just then, a new figure entered from the side door, Evelyn Harper, HR Director for Skirich Aviation. She held a thick file in one hand, her gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on McBride. "We've received a total of 3 formal complaints over the past 4 years against Captain McBride," Evelyn began, each citing racial bias and personal misconduct. None were properly investigated. That ends today. She turned toward McBride, removing a document from the file. "Under Skirich's internal policy and labor agreements, you are hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately. All system access and flight assignments are frozen. You are to return your badge and uniform to Human Resources within 24 hours. McBride didn't move. The 4 golden stripes on her shoulders, one symbols of pride, now felt like ghosts of something she no longer carried. The colleagues who used to nod in respect as she passed in the halls, who once clinked glasses with her on long-haul layovers, now looked away. There was no recognition in their eyes anymore, only silence and the weight of seeing someone fall from grace. Jerome didn't spare her another glance. He turned instead to the NADA and Skirich representatives. I'll also be submitting a motion for a full audit of internal grievance handling, specifically any case dismissed without proper review. This is no longer a personnel issue. This is a systemic reform. Heads nodded in unison, as if the room itself had exhaled for the first time. A new standard was being born, and Malik, the boy who once stood isolated at the center of suspicion, had become the spark that lit a fire no one could extinguish. As the suspension of Captain McBride was formally declared, the lounge felt like it had weathered a storm. The furniture hadn't moved. The screen still showed weather maps. But everything felt different, as though the air had been cleared of a long-settled layer of invisible prejudice. Malik Turner remained beside his father, silent, though vindicated. The bruises of humiliation still echoed quietly inside him. And then, the atmosphere shifted again. A woman entered. Her presence was calm but commanding, like a breeze that carried both strength and grace. She wore the Skirich uniform, shining gold stripes on her shoulders, and a name tag that read, Captain Sloan Carter. At 38, she was one of the first black female pilots to be appointed captain for Skirich's international routes. But what people remembered most wasn't her title. It was her calm presence, her unwavering grace, and the kind of gaze that made you feel truly heard. Captain Sloan Carter approached Malik slowly and gently leaned down, her voice as warm as her smile. Hi there, Malik. I've seen everything that happened today, and let me be the one to tell you, you don't just deserve to be here. You belong here. Malik's eyes widened, stunned into silence. Ma'am, are you a pilot? Sloan chuckled softly. No one ever thought I'd become one either. Not growing up in Brooklyn, surrounded by honking horns and low expectations. But I proved that the sky doesn't care about bias. It only answers to courage and commitment. She extended a hand, her expression inviting. Come with me. I want to show you where you really belong. Malik glanced back at his father. Jerome gave a quiet nod, and then, without a word, Malik followed. They walked together down a quiet corridor that opened onto a side tarmac, where a Skirich Boeing 787 sat gleaming in the late morning sun, ready for its scheduled flight to Seattle. The cockpit door opened with a soft hiss. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. The glow of the flight deck, with its glowing switches, gleaming controls, and digital displays. It wasn't a postcard anymore. It was real. It was here. Sloan gently placed her hand on Malik's shoulder. Take a good look. One day, you'll sit right here. And when that day comes, you won't just be flying planes. You'll be paving the way for other kids, ones who've been told they're not the right fit. Because here's the most important truth. You don't need permission to dream. Malik drew in a breath, deep and steady. There were no more tears in his eyes, only light. He realized something profound in that moment. His dream hadn't been stolen. It had simply been waiting for the right moment and the right person to light the flame again. From the moment he stepped into the cockpit of that 787 alongside Captain Sloan Carter, Malik Turner knew he would never be the same. Not because his dignity had been restored, but because belief in himself, in justice, and in a future larger than fear had been ignited forever. The incident at Sierra Gateway International Airport soon became national news. But instead of dodging controversy, the National Aviation Transportation Authority, NADA, led by Jerome Turner, turned it into a catalyst for sweeping reform. 1 month later, in a ceremony at the Federal Center for Civil Aviation, before hundreds of industry leaders and media outlets, 16-year-old Malik Turner was formally honored as NADA's first ever youth aviation ambassador. The title wasn't just a recognition of courage. It was a charge to carry his story far and wide, to inspire change where change was needed most. Malik began the next chapter of his journey traveling to schools, aviation academies, and conferences across the United States. He stood on stages in his crisp navy blazer, a small NADA pin gleaming on his lapel, sharing a story that once felt like a wound, but had become a beacon. Don't let bias bury your dreams, he said once at a youth aviation summit in Arizona. I'm not an exception. I'm just one of thousands of young people out there, kids who've been doubted because of how they look how they speak, or where they come from. But we weren't born to prove ourselves to those who don't believe. We were born to fly and to carry others with us. The quote spread like wildfire, reposted millions of times across social media, adopted as a rallying cry for a new generation entering aviation with a renewed conviction. Diversity isn't a slogan. It's the lift that helps this industry soar. In the wake of the incident, NADA partnered with the FAA and major airlines to launch Wings for All, a national initiative to support students from underrepresented communities who dream of careers in aviation. Malik became the face of the program, not just on posters or magazine covers, but in the hearts of young dreamers who saw themselves reflected in him. And every time he returned to Sierra Gateway, he would stop by the Skydeck Lounge. But he no longer sat quietly, waiting for someone to defend his right to be there. Now, he was the one dreams gravitated to be seen, to be lifted, to be carried far, high and free, just like the sky.